Well, how's everybody doing? I think this has been a great conference. Being a part of the office sector, in my work, I'm a workplace change management consultant. We're not building buildings, we're not designing space, we're not recommending specific acoustical treatments. We're purely helping on the people side of the change. Yet, when you look at the other sectors, healthcare, looking at education, we've done the office environments for people that work in that sector. So it's interesting. I've learned so much over the past day here, so it's really nice to be a part of this. I suggest that there are 5 big shifts that are taking place in the work environment, how people are working, perceptions, what needs to take place to help people through the changes in the work environment. Big shift number 1, default behaviors. So, years ago, your primary work typically was focus work. People worked as individuals. The work processes were very linear. If I were working in the financial institution, I may be working on some paper forms and claims, and after I did my work, I would pass it on to the next person, and they would work on that, and then they'd go to the other, and that's why it took so long to get insurance claims paid. Now we're working collaboratively. We're expected to. That's a very different shift. It's a different expectation of the performance of your teammates. It's not so much like, well, when are you going to get done with your work so I can start mine? It's working, very synchronized with your team. So back in the past, when you did need to collaborate, and maybe that was only a weekly meeting, or maybe it was an ad hoc opportunity that you had to speak with someone, you would go seek the collaborative space. So the big shift in this area, the default behavior now is more collaborative work. Many organizations are putting people in their primary space is more open and more collaborative. So the shift is, it's up to that individual to seek out a space to do focus work, to seek out a space to make that private phone call, to seek out a space when just too much noise. So this is an area that we have to help people understand, that if you're moving to a more open office environment, that the onus is on you. In large part, to understand the workplace and understand what the different properties are in terms of, this is a quiet zone, this is a more active zone. Go find the spot that is best suited for the task at hand. Big shift number 2, expectations. Used to be that if you're employed in an office environment by really any industry, there's offices everywhere, that you had a large space. It was dedicated to you. You had your name on the little plate outside the cubicle wall or outside the private office. And that space had to be large enough to accommodate every single thing you do. So if I had a cubicle, maybe I wasn't even a leader, maybe I was just an individual contributor in a cubicle. Yet I needed a cubicle large enough so I could have 2 chairs, so someone came to talk to me, had to be there right in that space. That space had to be large enough for me to put up photographs of my husband and my son, and if I had a hobby or there's vacation time or something, you had to have your little gadgets and gizmos and trinkets up there to personalize your space. That was my space, and no one dare touch that. Even if I was on 2-week vacation, that spot stood there waiting for me. Expectations have to change. They have to shift. Unfortunately, a lot of individuals that are moving into a more open office environment have that same perception and expectation that, I need to have everything, and now I'm going to be in an open benching system, and where do I put my photographs? And, where, if somebody needs to talk to me, there's no room to sit over there because I'd be bumping into the next person if I scoot over a little bit. So we need to help individuals understand that the entire office environment is yours to use. To understand that there are different types of spaces, different work settings in an activity-based work setting, for example, that is going to provide you opportunities and choices and control. So that's a positive thing. Yet there's that fear of, what happens if I come in and there's nowhere for me to work? What happens if everybody comes in the office? Well, if everybody has to come in the office, usually because it's a company-wide meeting and you're in the auditorium anyway, so you just need a place to perch or to, set your laptop down to check. The expectations have to shift. Big shift number 3, management. And I use that term rather loosely because I feel that many leaders today are more operating in the mode of being supervisors. They feel like they need to see that person. You need to be there at 8:30. You're allowed to leave at 12 to go for your 1-hour lunch unless you're in Paris, and then I hear you get 2 hours because you have to shop. And then you could go home when I tell you it's time to go home, and I'm going to tell you what to be doing during the day and when it's due and how to do it. That's not how business gets done anymore. Managers may have an entirely different number of direct reports. There's not the time to supervise or babysit people. It has to get away from the line of sight supervision. We see many managers, and when they're in a changing office environment, much of the thought is, if I can't see my people, how do I know they're working? Well, you can understand that you can have all your people gathered around and not allowed to be mobile on campus or within a single building, and you see someone working away on the computers, like, wow, they're very diligent, they're really working hard, and if you walk by, they're surfing the internet. Just because that person is there at their desk doesn't necessarily mean that they're producing something. So a big struggle in organization is helping educate the managers on how to lead people, how to understand that the reason we hired these individuals is not to see their handsome face every morning. We hired them for results, for their talents and skills. And what is it they're delivering? We're in a knowledge economy. There may be certain positions that still have, deliverables that you can count. So, I used the insurance industry before. So if you have to process, 25 customer requests an hour, maybe you can't quantify it. But in many times, someone's working on that next new breakthrough and an idea. And how can you put a time frame on that? It's much more loose. So focusing on results is something that mid-level managers are struggling with. We also see at that level in the organization that often those are the people that are struggling the most with a more open office environment or activity-based work settings, because if you have been working for your company for 17 and a half years and you've inched up the hierarchical ladder and you're about a year and a half away from the private office in the corner. Right now you have a pretty crummy, small private office and not a good view, but you would know where you're going to be in the organization if you did your job well. All of a sudden your company says, we're doing away with private offices and you're going to be in a cubicle, or maybe in a benching system. You won't even have a cubicle. That person's status is tied into how big their office is. We see that workspace is actually a currency. The more important you are, The bigger your office, the nicer your office. And now all of a sudden, you're having organizations that everybody is going to be seen as equal. We see a lot of the reasons why workplace transformation doesn't work well is because the leaders will say, wow, we're going to save this money in real estate. We're doing away with 100 dedicated spaces. It's going to save us $1 million US a year, every year for that savings. But you're not changing my workspace. So if you're going to exclude yourself from those kinds of changes of behavior, it's never going to be as successful. Big shift number 4, dynamics or movement in the office. It used to be where your space remained the same. You had that big space that could accommodate every single thing you needed to do, and that individual was stationary. If you came in if you had to start at 8 a.m., you came in, you sat there, you had your coffee break, you could leave for 15 minutes, you had your lunch break, it was time to go home, you went home. Now the space is flexible. And I ask, because I've heard a couple of people mention, well, we didn't need flexible space. What does flexible space mean in Europe? Is that different? What's flexibility with the physical space here? No definitions of flexible? I almost got the feeling that it was something negative, because flexibility is something, at least in North America, we're trying to have it more inherent in the design, that we want spaces that could be changed, moved around by end users, spaces that could be adapted over time as the company grows or shrinks. So now space is flexible, but typically when we're in talking with a new client, we say, you know, most companies are doing pretty well at creating these great new work environments, but who's helping the people be flexible? Because you just can't automatically change the work environment, tell people to show up on Monday, and they know how to use that space. It's a learned process. And then lastly, the last big shift is in status. We talked a little bit about space being a currency, and in many organizations it is. Have anybody been walking around an office and you see people counting ceiling tiles? Anybody seen that? No? A couple. What is that all about? It's about your status. Because if I get a promotion and they say, Diane, your office is going to be right there, I'm going to go over there and it's just like 1, 2, 3, 4. I've got like I'm missing a half of a ceiling tile there, and the person next to me, my peer, has that full ceiling tile. It's like, I need more space. So they're judging their worth based on that. So we're looking at things like entitlement to larger, nicer spaces. That's not only supposed to be for the senior leadership. You're seeing more when you do maintain the private offices, they're being brought into the center core of the building and having the perimeter be areas for teams to work, for a walking path, whatever, so that more people can enjoy that daylight. Obviously, that contributes to the well-being and health, and taking away some of that stress when you can see nature through the window. And I also mentioned the changes are fine for the employees, but not for me. We'll see this phenomena that I named in my book silent sabotage. You see leaders that are going to be losing private offices, and they're very good corporate citizens. They're political. They're going to make sure that they're seen in the right light. And they hear the workplace is changing, and they may not complain. They may say, oh, wow, sounds like a great idea. I'll be closer to my people, be more productive. But silently, they're doing everything possible to sabotage that new workplace strategy, and they do a pretty darn good job of it. So if you don't hear people complaining about the changing work environment, then maybe your problem is bigger than you think. But the concept is now in more of the offices, the space belongs to everyone. We need to have the culture that allows that, so that if I'm working on the second floor and I need a space on the fourth floor, that I can go up there and people aren't looking and saying, what are you doing here? You know, because it's meant to be egalitarian, it's meant to be open to all. And that is all I have to say for now.